Hello dear learner, I welcome you to the lecture 5 of week 9. It is continuation of the 4 lectures on ecological democracy, and today study various components of ecological democracy and also the values of ecological democracy. Thirdly, we will see in somewhat detail the role of civil society in global environmental governance, and we will also study RSG Convention and what importance it has got when we are talking about ecological democracy. So, to begin with, some of the components. We have already studied, in fact, some of the important components of ecological democracy in our earlier lectures. To continue with that, we will see some more components, and one of them is achievement of social justice and reduction of social inequalities. Because we have already discussed about the political aspect of democracy, economic aspect of democracy, now this is a social aspect of democracy. When we are talking about environmental protection, social justice is intimately linked with the question or issue of ecological preservation, because it is a question of the rights of the livelihood of people who are poor and marginalized. It is a question of the equitable distribution of natural resources. It is a question of right to food, right to pure air, water, and other basic resources, and so on. So, therefore, reduction of social inequalities. Now, this has become so glaring with the coming of modern, that is, neoliberal economic policies, that we find that in the last maybe 10 to 20 years, we find this inequality has increased so much. And it is continuously increasing. And the rich are getting more richer, poor are getting more poorer. So when we are talking about ecological democracy, simply by making incremental changes here and there, it will not be enough. Which the environmental democracy may be talking about, or it can be adopted or achieved by making certain laws or taking some steps here and there. These are not enough. We have to bring about fundamental structural changes. We have to bring about fundamental transformation in our social values, how we think and what motivates us. Also we have to make fundamental changes in our behavioral patterns, in our everyday lifestyle, and every citizen has to make or undergo these transformations. Then only it can help in the establishment of ecological democracy. Otherwise, it cannot be imposed from above. It cannot be achieved only by the state, and we have already seen state-centric perspective is of no use. It is having very limited use. So, when we are talking about ecological democracy, we have to think in terms of reducing social inequalities or how to achieve social justice. Then another very important or essential component of ecological or eco-democracy is we have to recognize cultural and knowledge diversity. Now, what we mean by cultural diversity? Because as an Indian, we are very much familiar with this concept, because India is a culturally diverse country, having different cultures, having different viewpoints, fooding habits, living habits, and so on, languages, religion. We have to recognize these diversities. Yes, we need certain minimum level of consensus on issues, on decisions to be implemented. But at the same time, we have to recognize the diversities also. Because diversities are very much an important component of not only ecological democracy, but also democracy as such. And it has been already recognized by our Indian Constitution. Then is knowledge diversity. Now, we have to understand that there are various sources of knowledge. For example, science may be one source of gaining knowledge or knowing the truth, but there are multiple other ways of knowing the truth. There can be something, which cannot be known by the help of scientific methods. And it does not mean that they do not exist. So there are multiple ways of acquiring knowledge, multiple sources of knowledge, and then there is not only Western knowledge, but there is a huge treasure house of non-Western knowledge, which provides alternative perspective of building society, of individual lives, of establishing a more sound and healthy ecosystem, of organizing our political lives, and so on. So we have to recognize that. In the name of universalism, we cannot impose only Western notion of development or Western notion of theories on the entire universe. And then is ecological resilience and wisdom constitutes the essence of ecological democracy. Ecological resilience is very important because we are talking about renewing our ecology. We are considering ecology as a living being, as a living embodiment and not simply a commodity. And wisdom. The vast wisdom, knowledge which we have inherited for so many generations is a big source of knowledge that cannot be understood simply with the help of or with the precepts of science and technology. But they are immensely practical, immensely useful, and have been productive since ages. So that needs to be recognized. That should form a part of our talk about ecological democracy. Now, eco-democracy is based on a particular worldview which needs different set of values. Some of them we have already discussed. Some of them I would like to again mention, and also some of them are new in nature. The first is spirituality. Why I have incorporated this value? Because what does the spirituality says? The spirituality believes in oneness, that we all are basically one. Whether we are human beings belonging to any part of the world or non-human world, whether they are animal, plants, they all possess the same spirit. And since they all are part of that Almighty, so we all are one. So since we all are one, so essentially we all are connected with each other. And according to Mahatma Gandhi, I would like to quote him again, that if one person is unhappy or deprived at any corner of the world, then all the other persons cannot be happy. So my happiness lies in the happiness of all. Now this is totally in contradiction to the individualist way of thinking, which believes that my well-being is connected only if I pursue my own interest. So we can see that why spirituality is important, because it talks about oneness of being and how we are linked in a symbiotic relationship with all the other elements of ecosystem. Then connectivity. We cannot understand ecological democracy in a fragmented perspective or in the reductionist perspective. You cannot reduce things or subtract things and understand with the help of those fragmented perspective a larger dimension of life. It cannot be done. You have to understand the connectivity, the synthesis of our life with other lives on this earth. Then communitarian thinking. It is opposite of individualist thinking, because communitarian thinking have been part of our social lives in the non-Western world. Our society was never an individualistic society. It was always a communitarian society. We were very closely knit communities, giving more importance to our family than community. And we believe that individual interest can be best served within a family, within a community. The community form of thinking was an important aspect of non-Western society. Sense of responsibility, accountability. You cannot do away by doing certain things and escape the responsibility. Many of the Western countries have been indulging in tremendous exploitation of resources for achieving such a stupendous level of development. But who are bearing the consequences of those unbridled development? The poor countries, the non-Western countries, and the countries of the South. But now they are not ready to share their responsibility. They are not taking the accountability. So, this sense of responsibility is a very, very essential component of the ecological democracy. Similarly, I will give you a small example to illustrate the sense of responsibility. At an individual level, you have heard a very important statement or quotation which you find at times pasted on the posters across the towns and cities, that my waste, my responsibility. I cannot simply throw my waste anywhere and degrade and spoil the environment. If it is my waste, then its proper disposal is also my responsibility. And the nature of waste can be anything. But it is my responsibility because that is generated by me. So, you have seen that people are throwing garbage, papers and litters on the roads without thinking that how much they are contributing to the spoiling of environment or to the spoiling of the civic life. Actually develop a sense of responsibility that what we are doing, we have to be accountable for them. Then cooperation, about which we have already discussed. And the last is the recognition of diversity. We have to recognize diversity because our ecosystem is full of biodiversities. We have to recognize that. We have to give due importance to their position, their functioning in the ecosystem. Even a small insect and microbes have their own role and functioning in the ecosystem. We have to recognize their role and how their role are important for the existence of human beings. We have so many examples to illustrate this point. So, after discussion of these issues of the participation of citizens and also the values which are needed for the establishment of ecological democracy, now I come to the second part, that is how the role of civil society or how their participation can be increased at the global governance level. Because at the national level, it is already taking place to an extent and it is actually much more easier to do. But at the global level, at the transnational level, how to involve the civil society across the world? Who will be involved? How it can be done? It is a big task. But it is needed because the environmental problems are actually global in nature and we need transnational solutions to address them. So, we need the involvement of the civil society organizations to make our decision making more transparent and inclusive in nature. So, these two are very important components of decision making in eco-democracy. Now, why the role of civil society is important? It has been doing multiple functions or fulfilling multiple objectives in the sphere of environmental protection. First of all, it has played a very important role in bringing the emerging environmental issues to the attention of policymakers. This is very, very important because the policymakers may not be updated about the latest environmental problems which may be witnessed by a section of people at a particular corner of the world. So, these issues are being brought to the limelight of the policymakers with the help of the people who belong to the civil society organizations. Now, I would like to mention some of the practical steps that have been taken towards involvement of civil society at the international level or international decision making which relates to environment. In the 1992 Rio de Janeiro Earth Summit, is a very historic summit for many reasons, which played a crucial role in formal inclusion of large number of civil society groups, which was really unprecedented and significant. So the 1992 summit, which discussed various environmental issues facing the earth, also initiated a very important step towards inviting the civil society members, large number of civil society groups to participate in the deliberations. Then we have the example of the Paris Conference of 2015 and the Marrakesh Conference in 2016, which actually saw participation of large number of non-state actors such as businesses, city officials or environmental NGOs, who have actively participated and they have given their inputs towards the decision making. Now, the United Nations Environment Programme has a unit which is devoted to civil society, UNEP. It is committed to partnering with major groups and stakeholders who bring valuable research, expertise and advocacy functions to the table. So, the purpose of the civil society unit is to involve all major stakeholders and organizations across the world who can do research, who can analyze things because of their expertise, and who can do the function of advocacy, advocating for various environmental issues. Now, the effectiveness of the civil society in environmental decision making for bringing the desired changes has been a type of mixture. So, if we evaluate whether this involvement of civil society groups at the transnational level have been a success or a failure, then we get a mixed reaction. Because some argue that they have prompted states to be more committed to achieve environmental goals, because since they are updated, they are always having a look over the state's policies, state actions. So they are always on the vigil or radar of the civil society groups. The states and its actions are always on the radar of the civil society groups. So therefore, the state also becomes more alert, more accountable, more transparent, because now they have to answer to various stakeholders, various organizations in the civil society who may question them, who may ask for evidence. So therefore, it has made the state more committed to achieve environmental goals in some respect. So this is achievement. But others have argued that they have not been so much successful in bringing about desired outcomes, which were actually expected. That if we involve more and more civil society in the deliberation, then we will be able to achieve more desired outcomes. But unfortunately, the level to which we were expecting the results, it was not achieved. So this is one of the important, a pessimistic understanding of the role of civil society. Then another very important fear has been expressed that these groups will be co-opted in the global environmental governance structure, which can ultimately weaken their commitments to ecological issues. So if they are co-opted, or if they are supposed to toe the line of the governmental policies, then their a very critical role in bringing about transformation or in keeping a vigil over the functioning of the state is actually lost. So their empowering aspect or their critical aspect, or you can say their edges gets blunt, their objectives get somehow diluted. So this is one of the apprehension which has been expressed by some of the scholars. But there is no doubt that large number of civil society groups' participation has been an important milestone towards eco-democracy. So there are criticisms with every action and behavior. There are certain advantages and also certain disadvantages, but they can be addressed. But overall, they have played a very important role towards ecological democracy. Now, the third part of this lecture is Aarhus Convention. This convention is very, very important for those who are seriously thinking for ecological democracy. This Earth Convention was on access to information, then public participation in decision making, and access to justice in environmental matters, and this convention was adopted in 1998. You can see there are three aspects of this convention. It has highlighted three important goals, and these three goals are very, very important and have tremendous connection with ecological democracy. The first is access to information, about which we have already discussed, and what role it can play in ensuring environmental justice. Then public participation in the process of decision making. In fact, the two elements, they both are important and essential components of any democratic setup. And access to justice, the environmental matter, is an ecological perspective. And when we are talking about equal access, then we are talking about ecological democracy. Now, this convention protects every person's right to live in an environment adequate to his or her health and well-being. Very, very important right. It protects the individual's right to live in an environment adequate to his or her health or well-being. Every person is having the right. It is not only the rich and the powerful and influential who is having the right to live in a decent and in a proper manner, but every person, whether poor, marginalized, tribal, they have the right to live in a decent environment where they can fulfill their needs. Now, they are the only globally legally binding instruments on environmental democracy. So this Earth Convention is important because it is only global legally binding document on environmental democracy that puts Principle 10 of the Rio Declaration on environment and development in practice. So therefore, you can understand why this convention or why this important conference which took place was so important. It links environmental rights and human rights. So you have already discussed that how the ecocentric and anthropocentric perspective can be combined, and therefore this convention is also talking about combining environmental rights with human rights. That is, both can be combined. Then it focuses on interaction between public and public authorities in the democratic context. So it is not simply chosen representatives are formulating the decisions on their own whims and wishes, but there is an active interaction between the public, the people, and the government in every matter of the decision making. Now, environmental rights are another important factor which had positive impact on environmental goals and also strengthened the democratic processes. Now, we have already discussed in some detail the importance of environmental rights. And these environmental rights, we have already seen that they act as a limit or barrier, or in a way, it is a boundary to the state. But they have also been very helpful in protecting some of the basic rights or some of the environmental goals which we could achieve because of the existence of these rights, and in a way they have strengthened the democratic process also. After environmental rights, the third important thing which we must understand is the importance of the environmental movements. They have played a very important role in moving towards ecological democracy as it promotes grassroots participation and also environmental protection. So, environmental movements have been a very important part of democracy because it talks about active citizens' participation at the local level. So, when we are talking about the ecological democracy, environmental movements constitute a very, very important part because it promotes grassroots participation, it promotes the whole soul objective of environmental protection, and it also, creates awareness among the citizens about environmental issues, about measures to be taken for protecting the environment. So therefore, the advantages of movement are immense in nature. They have also played an important role in advocating for policy changes, such as stronger environmental protection and regulations on industry and businesses. So this is a very specific achievement. And one of the most important and specific achievement of the environmental movement, especially at the local level, has been that through their voices, they have been able to pressurize the businesses or the government to make laws which can protect the environment, which can protect the people who are displaced, so that they can get adequate compensation, so that the marine or the water bodies which are being affected by the establishment of the big industrial houses are protected. And in a way, with the help of these advocacies, they are able to achieve so many things, whether through the building of laws or through the building of certain measures which can help in environmental protection. So they can help in checking the intentions or motivations of industries and business houses who may try to exploit the environmental resources at the cost of the ecosystem, at the cost of the rights of the individual, and so on. Moreover, these environmental movements have focused on the basic issues of their lives. Like they have talked about the air and water pollution. They have asked for how the problem of deforestation can be addressed. They have been talking about climate change, then sustainable energy resources, and so on. Even the issues of displacement, how their cultural rights or their livelihood rights are getting affected. All these issues, and also so many other multifarious issues, they are being reflected or they are being raised in the environmental movements across the world. Now, at the last, I would like to discuss some of the challenges in the path of ecological democracy, because we have studied a lot about what is ecological democracy, what are the various aspects, elements, values, how it is different from the traditional democracy, and so on. But what are the challenges? The first challenge is sometimes citizens can promote their own interest rather than environmental concern. Now, this is a serious challenge, because we are expecting that more and more citizens, if they participate in the decision making, then obviously they will be coming to more eco-friendly decisions. But it has been found that the citizens may not always act in the interest of the ecosystem, they may act in their own interest, thus actually sabotaging the entire purpose or entire objectives of ecological democracy. Then the second challenge is that when we talk about the non-human interest in the ecological democracy, then the question arises, who is going to represent the non-human beings? Who is going to speak on their behalf? For example, who is going to speak on behalf of the plants or animals, or for that matter, the Mother Earth? And the third level, or the third important hindrance is the low level of awareness about the impact of environmental degradation or its impact on life is another alarming situation. Because you can see that if you just have a look at the ordinary citizens and their motivation and understanding of environmental protection, you will find that the level of awareness is very low. And this is an alarming thing, because it is the citizens at the very local level. They have to undergo various transformations in their everyday practices. A small and incremental changes can bring about larger changes at the world and at the planetary level. So awareness is a first step towards incorporating the ideals and practices of eco-democracy. And the fourth is ecological conservation is never the primary agenda of the political parties. You will find very few political parties are talking about ecological protection, ecological problems, which are actually a huge concern for the humanity today. But they are not getting reflected in the party manifesto, nor they are the issues of debate, nor they constitute the political narratives during election. So that may be one of the important reasons why all the concerns and problems or debates on ecological issues are always at the periphery. So these are some of the challenges of ecological democracy. So we come to the end of this lecture, followed by a couple of questions which are related to the topics which we have already covered, and followed by some statements and questions to steer your imagination. For example, can you think of reasons why people are less sensitive to environmental problems in spite of facing rising pollution, water crisis, global warming in their daily lives? Or find out 5 most severe environmental problems and suggest how they can be addressed by the eco-democratic approach. With this, we come to the end of this lecture. I hope you have enjoyed it. Thank you very much.